Lewis Hamilton was 1 second quicker than Charles Leclerc at the Imola Grand Prix. Stick around until the end to catch the heated exchange between the two drivers in the paddock after the race. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix didn't wait for the green lights to unleash chaos. The real eruption came long after the engines fell silent. And while the racing itself was clinical, strategic, and razor-close, it wasn't what the world ended up talking about. No, the moment that truly detonated came when the helmets came off and the gloves, metaphorically and emotionally, were dropped. Lewis Hamilton, every bit the gladiator of modern Formula One, crossed the line a full second ahead of Charles Leclerc. In today's era of near-equal machinery and hyper-optimized setups, that's not a win, that's a statement of superiority. But Hamilton's masterclass wasn't the most shocking part. What really set fire to the paddock, fractured team relations, and sent the F1 community into a digital frenzy, was the explosive confrontation that followed. One filled with venom, ego, fury, and a warning shot heard all around the motorsport world. It all escalated from lap 3, a moment so surgical in its execution and so brutal in its consequences that analysts were still rewinding it hours later, frame by frame. As the cars thundered into Variante-Villeneuve, Hamilton darted to the inside with ferocity. Not hesitation. Not calculation. Pure instinct. He saw the slightest daylight, and like a predator tasting blood, he lunged. The nose of the Mercedes pierced the gap as Leclerc lined up his apex. There was barely room for two wheels, let alone two multi-million-dollar machines. And yet, Hamilton wedged himself in, nudging the curb, leaving Leclerc boxed in like prey. With Norris and Piastri looming behind, Leclerc had two options: yield or collide. He lifted, braked hard, and the moment he blinked, the pack pounced. Norris went wide left. Piastri ducked right. Perez went full throttle down the center in a move bordering on madness. Then Alonso surged in, and Sainz followed, scenting blood in the air. Within a blink, Leclerc had plummeted 5 places. His rhythm? Shattered. His confidence? Bruised. His pride? Set ablaze. Leclerc's team radio was a storm. His voice? Clipped. Crackling. Almost unrecognizable in its fury. What the hell was that? He forced me off. Completely reckless. No margin. No respect, he hissed, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You've got to report that. Now. That wasn't racing, that was desperation. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. And from that point on, something was broken. He fought back, clawed his way up 2 positions, but the fire was misaligned. The drive wasn't clean. The rhythm was gone. Every corner looked like a man chasing revenge, not racing a strategy. Meanwhile, Hamilton drove like a surgeon, each lap precise, each sector clinical. He managed tires. He defended when needed. He attacked only when the numbers said go. By the time they crossed the line, the gap to Leclerc was a brutal 1 second. But the margin didn't just represent time, it was psychological dominance. And Leclerc felt it. Deep. But what happened next? That's what made headlines. Leclerc didn't go to his engineers. He didn't debrief. He didn't even remove his helmet. He stormed through Parc Ferme like a man possessed, passing journalists, officials, and his own team without a word. Straight toward Hamilton, who was sharing a quiet, low-key moment with Russell and Wolff outside the Mercedes hospitality area. There was laughter. A breath of relief after a demanding weekend. And then, without warning, the storm arrived. You think that was okay? Leclerc barked, ripping off his helmet with a fury that startled even the nearby stewards. You dive-bombed me, Lewis. Lap 3. You didn't leave space, you shoved your way in. Hamilton stood up straighter, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel. Calm, composed, unshaken. I saw a gap, Charles. I took it. You hesitated, I didn't. You call that racing? Leclerc spat. You nearly wrecked both of us. I had cars on my tail. No room to breathe. And you threw it in like it was Monaco in the rain. Hamilton's voice was lower now, colder. It's not my job to protect your track position. You flinched. I didn't. That's racing. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. A crowd was forming. Engineers paused. Photographers raised their lenses. Someone from Red Bull's garage literally stepped forward to watch. And still, the confrontation escalated. "You always do this," Leclerc said, voice cracking under the strain. "You pull a move like that, and then you act like it's just business. Like you're above consequence." "Then stop letting me do it," Hamilton replied, every word a scalpel. "You want the win? Take it. Don't expect me to hand it to you." The press area buzzed with disbelief. Even Netflix's Drive to Survive crew abandoned another interview to rush toward the scene. Within minutes, Twitter, now X, was ablaze. Hashtag Leclerc versus Hamilton trended at #1 globally. Two camps formed almost instantly, Hamilton's loyalists defending his warrior mentality, and Leclerc's defenders calling the move reckless and selfish. Influencers, ex-drivers, and pundits from every corner of the F1 ecosystem were pulled into the discourse. Sky Sports F1 reran the onboard 37 times in 2 hours. ESPN brought in IndyCar drivers to weigh in. Even MotoGP stars commented. Martin Brundle's post-race debrief was flooded with emails calling it the most emotionally charged Grand Prix moment in years. And the fallout? Titanic. Ferrari insiders leaked that Vasseur nearly exploded in the team debrief. Not only because of the overtake, but because of the mental spiral it sent Leclerc into. He wasn't himself, one engineer said anonymously. That one moment undid months of progress. He took it personally, and Charles doesn't usually crack like that. At Mercedes, the story was very different. Hamilton was reportedly ice-cold in his analysis. No emotion. Just data. "He's gone into beast mode," said a Mercedes strategist. This wasn't about points. This was about declaring war on the season. Liberty Media executives were ecstatic. Viewer numbers shattered records. Social engagement doubled in under 48 hours. Hamilton versus Leclerc wasn't just a rivalry now, it was a headline franchise. And the FIA? Silent. No penalties. No reviews. Just a quiet, final note that the stewards deemed it a racing incident. But in the eyes of Ferrari, that silence was thunderous. Word spread that they were preparing to push for clearer overtaking regulations, a move that insiders say could create major tension in the driver's briefing at the next race. Meanwhile, Leclerc has reportedly hired a private performance psychologist, not because he's losing his edge, but because he refuses to lose the mental war. "If this season becomes psychological," a Ferrari rep said privately, "we'll be ready." And Hamilton? He's already shifted gears. 2 late-night simulator sessions. A brand-new setup direction being tested. Rumors say he asked for historical data, not from this year, but from every race he's ever had against Leclerc. He's not preparing for a fight. He's preparing for domination. The season has a new axis now. Not just Red Bull supremacy. Not just McLaren's rise. But a blood feud. A two-man war wrapped in carbon fiber and downforce. And everyone knows, this isn't ending anytime soon. This is just the beginning. And next time? There might not be any room left to lift. The second Lewis Hamilton stepped out of his car, still breathing heavily, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline, he yanked off his helmet and looked toward the pit lane. His suit was soaked with sweat, and every muscle in his body was still buzzing from the brutal last laps. That's when he saw it. Not a reporter, not a camera crew, but Charles Leclerc, storming down the paddock like a man possessed. He wasn't walking, he was charging, cutting through engineers and team personnel like they weren't even there. His face was locked in a scowl, his eyes burning with fury, lips pressed so tightly they were almost white. He didn't head toward the Ferrari garage. He didn't even glance at his own team. No, Leclerc was heading straight for Mercedes. Directly. Purposefully. Like a missile. It was unheard of. Drivers don't just march into rival motorhomes. Not right after a race. Not still in their suits. Not with that look in their eyes. But Leclerc didn't care. He wasn't there to shake hands. He wasn't there to talk strategy. He was there for a reckoning. Inside the Mercedes hospitality lounge, Hamilton had just started a quiet post-race discussion with his race engineer Peter Bonington. The room was still calming down, laptops opening, drinks being passed around, data streams beginning to populate the big screens. No one expected an eruption. And then, slam. The door burst open. Heads snapped up. And there he was. Leclerc didn't pause. Didn't ask permission. He marched straight across the room, straight through the silence, until he was standing inches from Lewis. "You call that a clean overtake?" he exploded, his voice loud enough to make someone in the hallway flinch. "You brake late, shove me into dirty air, almost make me lock up, and you call that racing?" Hamilton didn't rise to meet the volume. He barely moved. He just looked up, one eyebrow raised, setting down his water bottle with exaggerated calm. "I made the corner," Lewis replied coolly. "There was space. Maybe you just weren't ready for it." Leclerc's face twisted. "Don't you dare put that on me. You timed that dive knowing exactly what would happen. You pushed me offline with 2 McLarens behind me. You didn't just mess up my corner, you ruined my whole stint." The air in the room turned electric. Engineers froze, half sentences hanging in the air. A staffer accidentally dropped a tablet, the screen cracking silently on the floor. Nobody moved. Hamilton stood slowly, eye to eye now, not blinking. His voice, though calm, carried bite. "It's not my job to wait in line behind you. You left the inside open. That's an invitation." "An invitation?" Leclerc snapped. "Are you kidding me? That was a dive bomb. You threw your car into the apex like it was 2011 again. This isn't karting. This is Formula One." Lewis stepped closer, not backing down. "You're angry because I beat you to the move. Again. You had every chance to cover the inside. You didn't. That's not on me. That's racing." Leclerc's fists were clenched. His whole body was tense. Every time you don't have the lead, you throw these desperation moves. It's reckless. It's dangerous. And it's selfish. "You think I'm desperate?" Lewis said, letting the words hang like smoke in the air. "You're the one barging into other teams' garages like a spoiled child. You lost position, and now you're throwing a tantrum." At that moment, the door flung open again, this time with force. Toto Wolff stormed in, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. Neither driver responded. Wolff moved between them, putting a hand on each of their chests to force space. "This is not how professionals behave. You want to fight? Take it to the track. But in here, you show respect." Leclerc pointed past Toto's shoulder. "He risked my race. He forced me to compromise the corner, and now Ferrari's entire strategy went up in flames." Toto turned to Lewis. "Did you touch him?" "No," Lewis replied flatly. "Didn't even rub tires." "But he forced me wide," Leclerc insisted, still shaking. "He knew what he was doing. He didn't need to do it there." Hamilton's voice was ice now. "You keep telling yourself that. Maybe it'll help you sleep tonight." "You're chasing ghosts," Leclerc shot back. "You're not the driver you were. You're not feared anymore, you're expected. Expected to try something wild. Something desperate." "Better desperate than invisible," Hamilton muttered, and that was the last straw. Leclerc threw his gloves down on the floor, turned on his heel, and stormed out, the door slamming so hard behind him it rattled the glassware. The room stood frozen. Bonington sighed. That escalated. Lewis didn't look away from the door. He'll learn. Social media was already on fire. Clips of Leclerc storming into the Mercedes motorhome were being shared in real time. Hashtags like #Leclerc meltdown, #Hamilton attack, and #Paddock war were climbing globally. Pundits were speechless. Sky F1's broadcast team went into overdrive, dissecting the move at turn 5 from 10 different angles, frame by frame. The FIA released a brief statement, no further investigation required. But in the court of public opinion, the trial had just begun. Some fans rallied behind Leclerc, calling Hamilton's move vintage bullying. Others praised Lewis for showing the fire of a champion. The split was vicious. And it wasn't just fans. Other drivers were watching too. Lando Norris posted a cryptic eyes emoji on his story. Fernando Alonso simply tweeted, "Old habits die hard." Inside the paddock, whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to quiet roars. Because everyone knew the truth. This wasn't just about turn 5. It wasn't even about the race. This was about legacy. Hamilton, the lion of a fading dynasty, still clawing at relevance. Leclerc, the young prince denied glory one too many times. And today, on this scorched patch of tarmac and behind the motorhome doors, a new rivalry had erupted. And it was only just beginning. Leclerc didn't storm out. He calculated every step. He backed off just enough to avoid escalation, but his stare said everything words couldn't. First, he locked eyes with Toto Wolff, unblinking, like a man looking at a chessboard with the pieces halfway through a brutal match. Then he turned his gaze to Lewis Hamilton. Sharp. Controlled. Cold as a scalpel. "This isn't finished," he said, the words cutting like glass. Not loud, but lethal. Then he pivoted and walked out. No flinch. No glance back. He wasn't retreating. He was planning. And it truly wasn't finished. The temperature inside the paddock kept rising like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Exactly 17 minutes later, yes, someone counted, Frédéric Vasseur made his way into the Mercedes hospitality area with a presence that made people stand up straighter and breathe quieter. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He wasn't doing the usual PR dance. In one hand, a sleek tablet glowing with onboard footage, GPS overlays, throttle traces. In the other, a metaphorical grenade. He walked in like a man not looking for a discussion, but preparing for a battle. "Where's Toto?" he demanded, his voice clipped, urgent. "Where's Lewis?" A couple of Mercedes engineers stepped forward, trying to ease the tension. Standard play, delay, redirect, soften. Vasseur waved them off like a fly. He didn't come to play politics. He came to confront something head-on, and he wasn't leaving until it was addressed. When the door shut behind them, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Toto was already seated. Lewis was across from him, arms folded but relaxed, on the outside. Vasseur didn't sit. He planted the tablet on the table and tapped it once. A series of clips began to play automatically. Multiple angles. On board from Charles's cockpit. Lewis's visor cam. Helicopter shot. Corner telemetry. Brake pressure spikes. Steering input overlays. Sector delta readings. The works. "Explain this," Vasseur said, low and razor-sharp, like a scalpel. "Tell me, honestly, is this the racing you want your academy drivers studying on repeat? Tell me this is the benchmark we're supposed to celebrate." Toto leaned forward slightly, steepling his fingers. Calm. Composed. But choosing every word like it was a chess move. "Fred, we've gone through the data inside and out." Lewis was already initiating the overtake before the braking zone. He had the line. He didn't lock up. He controlled the entry. And he left space. Look at the exit, he gave enough margin. Vasseur was already shaking his head before Toto even finished. He left space for himself, not for Charles. Look again. Charles had to adjust mid-corner, or they would have collided. His entire line was compromised. That's not racecraft, that's roulette. That's a driver throwing the dice and letting the other guy be the one to decide whether they crash or not. That move forced Charles to sacrifice his momentum. It compromised the rest of his stint. That's not just aggressive, it's reckless. And it sets a dangerous tone. Hamilton shifted, leaned forward just slightly. The tension in his jaw eased, but his eyes narrowed with intent. "Fred, you don't have to lecture me on what racing is. I've been wheel to wheel with the best since I was a teenager. That move wasn't about luck. It was about timing. I committed early. I had confidence in my position. And I knew Charles had the instincts to react. That's mutual respect. He didn't get pushed off. He made the decision to avoid contact because we both knew where the limit was." Vasseur exhaled through his nose, controlled but clearly simmering. And what if he hadn't? What if someone else had been in that car? A rookie. A driver who panics. You're playing a game where the other person's wisdom saves your race. That's not sustainable. That's not safe. And most importantly, it's not racing. It's manipulation with a helmet on. Toto spoke again, this time more direct. If it crossed the line, the stewards would have penalized it. They had access to the same data, the same angles. They deemed it legal. That's the end of it, no? Vasseur's laugh was dry and bitter. No. That's the beginning of it. The FIA made a call, sure. But you and I both know how politics work in this paddock. If a lesser-known driver made that move, would they have walked away clean? Or would they be getting a 5-second penalty and a warning about dangerous conduct? Lewis raised an eyebrow. You're saying I get special treatment? I'm saying your reputation works both ways, Vasseur snapped. It gives you space on track, and it gives you leniency off it. But legacy doesn't mean immunity. And if you're using it to push the boundaries of what's acceptable, don't act shocked when people start pushing back. Lewis kept his voice level. I don't expect immunity. I expect recognition. Recognition that I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't make moves hoping someone else will save the day. I make moves because I've done it 1,000 times. Because I trust myself. And I trusted Charles. Vasseur turned slightly, his tone shifting from fire to steel. Then maybe your biggest mistake wasn't the move, it was assuming Charles would take it. That he'd absorb it. That he'd let it go. He looked at Toto. You lit a match today. Let's see how long before it catches fire. Then, just before he left, he looked back at Lewis. You want to race like it's personal? Fine. Just be ready when it becomes personal for Charles too. No further words. He walked out. No tablet left behind. No handshake. The air behind him felt carved with tension. Outside, the race was over, but the real fight was only just beginning. In motorhomes. In press conferences. In strategy rooms. Because moments like that, they don't end in lap charts. They echo. They fuel rivalries. They sharpen the edge of competition. And in Formula One, that edge is everything. The atmosphere in Imola didn't just cool off after the checkered flag, it turned radioactive. What unfolded behind closed doors made it clear, the incident between Hamilton and Leclerc wasn't just a hard-fought moment of wheel-to-wheel combat. It was the ignition point of a full-blown war. And while the world saw overtakes and split-second decisions, what the cameras didn't catch was far more explosive. Inside the post-race debrief, the mood was suffocating. Frédéric Vasseur didn't need to raise his voice. His body language did all the talking. Arms crossed, jaw tight, gaze locked on Mercedes representatives with a kind of icy fury that only a man who feels betrayed can produce. Then came the words, not shouted, but sharpened like a knife. That's not confidence, that's sheer arrogance, Vasseur said, voice calm but laced with venom. If that's how you want to play the rest of the season, then so be it. But don't come crying when it turns ugly. No official complaint. No grandstanding before the stewards. Ferrari knew exactly what they were doing by holding back. This wasn't surrender. It was strategic restraint. Like a chess grandmaster letting the opponent make the next move, knowing full well the trap was already set. The silence was deafening and deliberate. The paddock felt it immediately. The era of decorum was over. The kid gloves were off. It was personal now. Back in the Ferrari garage, Charles Leclerc was a live wire. Not the smooth, measured driver fans are used to. This was a different version, teeth clenched, voice low and razor-edged. He stood in front of the data monitor, eyes flicking from telemetry traces to onboard footage. But it wasn't the numbers he was seeing. It was him. Hamilton. Sweeping by in a move that skirted the edge of legality. And in Leclerc's mind, crossed it. He does it every damn time, Charles growled, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the garage. He expects me to yield. Like I'll just move over. I'm done with that. His race engineer tried to ease him down. We'll review the lap, see if there's. No. The response was instant, brutal. Next time I don't move. If we touch, we touch. There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. What had once been a respectful rivalry was gone, burned away in the heat of Imola. What remained was pure defiance. And Ferrari, watching their golden boy step into a more ruthless version of himself, didn't stop him. Because deep down they knew. You don't win championships with politeness. You win them by standing your ground, even if it means war. Across the paddock, the vibe in the Mercedes motorhome was strikingly different. Where Ferrari simmered, Mercedes radiated unbothered confidence. Lewis Hamilton leaned back in his chair, surrounded by his close team. Angela Cullen had returned to provide moral support, and Toto Wolff was just a few steps away, nodding quietly through updates. There was an almost smug calm in the air, like they'd weathered the storm and come out drier than expected. A team staffer asked the inevitable, "Do you think Charles is going to hold a grudge over this?" Hamilton didn't even blink. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "If he wants to start a fight, he's swinging at the wrong target," he said casually. "I'm not here to hand out respect. I'm here to collect wins." There was no bravado in his tone, just that unmistakable Hamilton steel. The kind of mindset forged in the heat of countless title fights. He wasn't concerned about how it looked. He didn't care about headlines or social media. He was focused on one thing: dominance. And if that meant crushing Ferrari's morale along the way, so be it. But what no one said aloud, yet everyone knew, was this: Hamilton versus Leclerc wasn't just a flashpoint. It was now the storyline. The paddock was buzzing, not with talk of car upgrades or tire degradation, but with whispered questions. Was this the beginning of a full-on psychological war? Was Leclerc finally shedding the nice guy image to become something darker? And had Hamilton just provoked something he wouldn't be able to control? By nightfall, the paddock had turned into a hive of speculation. Every journalist was on edge, every PR agent on alert. Someone said there had been a moment near the FIA motorhome, a fleeting face-to-face between Charles and Lewis, with neither of them speaking. Just eyes locking. Silent, loaded with venom. One of the mechanics described it like watching two lions sizing each other up, knowing the fight wasn't over. Just delayed. Back channels were buzzing too. Rumors emerged that Ferrari had compiled a dossier, radio transcripts, sector analysis, even predictive simulations, ready to present if Mercedes stepped out of line again. Others whispered that Toto Wolff had already asked FIA race control for preemptive clarification on overtaking etiquette in wheel-to-wheel battles. And the truth? Both were likely true. This wasn't just team rivalry anymore. This was tactical warfare. Even within the driver circles, the ripple effects were felt. Sainz, caught in the crossfire, was said to be frustrated, not at Charles, but at the situation. Privately, he told a friend, "It's going to explode in Montreal. I just hope I'm not collateral." Meanwhile, George Russell was heard telling his engineer, "We might need to watch Charles. He's not playing chess anymore. He's playing poker, and bluffing less." What makes all of this more intense is what lies ahead. Montreal. Circuit Gilles-Villeneuve. A track that's fast, narrow, and brutally unforgiving. One misjudged braking point, and you're in the wall of champions. And now, with the emotional fuse lit at Imola, nobody is expecting the temperature to go down. Quite the opposite. People around the paddock are already betting on how it'll play out. Will Charles dive bomb into turn 1 without lifting? Will Lewis squeeze him on exit just to prove a point? Will the stewards have to intervene, not to punish, but to separate two titans locked in a death spiral? This is no longer a sportsmanlike contest between two elite drivers. This is ego versus ego. Philosophy versus philosophy. Leclerc's bottled-up frustration has mutated into fire. Hamilton's relentless hunger for victory is now tinged with territorial dominance. Neither will yield. And both believe they're right. Every fan watching knows this isn't about just winning anymore. It's about psychological scars. It's about rewriting the hierarchy. It's about sending a message so loud, so brutal, that it echoes across every garage, every simulator, every boardroom in the sport. And what's coming next in Montreal? It's not just another Grand Prix. It's the next chapter in a war no one asked for, but now, no one can look away from.